Today we're starting a brand new series talking about the arcs of the Bible, and we've called this Find Yourself in the Story. A lot of people feel very lost today about just what does it even mean to be a human? What does it mean to be in this world and so much changing around us, kind of finding your roots and finding your sense of yourself in this culture, in the world today. So much more moving online. What does it even mean to just be a person? And I'm really praying that over this next 6 weeks or so, that we're going to learn how to find ourselves not in the culture, but find ourselves in God's story. God has been working on this humanity project for a long time now. And you and I are part of God's story. We are part of this story. I am an Australian. I am, you are. Some of us here are Australians. If you're not, you're super welcome. My wife is Japanese. And I'm Australian. That's part of who I am. My family is Irish, if you can't tell. That's kind of my roots. I'm a Kennedy. That's sort of part of my story. But much bigger than that, I have a bigger part of my story than that, and that is I am part of the family of God. And that goes way back to the roots of the first humans. I am part of that story. And that puts roots down in my life that even though the world is changing so much, it puts roots down and helps me to make sense of the world and to shape my worldview. We all come with a worldview. And most of our worldviews are shaped by the culture around us. That was one of the things that coming from Japan last year, coming back to Australia, I noticed very quickly how influenced by Australian culture Australians are. That should not be a surprise, but I felt like an Australian but an outsider coming back in, and how what's normal is not actually that normal in the world, in Australia. It's quite different here than other places in the world. That's neither good nor bad. It's culture. It's what's normal to us. Your worldview comes out of what you feel like is normal. But we need to create a new normal. We need to get our normals from the God story. And even when we approach the Bible, we are at a disadvantage when we approach the Bible because we have an Australian culture. We don't have a Hebrew culture. We don't come from the Near East 2,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago. We come from Australia in 2023. So we're at a disadvantage. We're like tourists going through the Bible, trying to understand. But if you've been overseas and you've traveled overseas, you've seen good tourists and bad tourists, right? The good tourists who are there to learn and experience and take it all in. And there's some bad tourists who are there just to impose their culture onto the place that they're going. And that's called being rude, right? So don't be a bad tourist or a bad exchange student. Go and experience and don't expect everything to be the same as what you have it. Even when we talk about words, we are really bringing our own culture to the words that we say. Words are not so much important. It's the imagination, it's the underlying feeling that we have about words that really shapes what those words mean to us. So if I was to say this is Tim's backpack. If I was to take this backpack, you can imagine this is a word, right? Say, for example, when I talk about the earth, okay? When I say the word earth, there's a lot of concepts that go inside of this backpack for me as a Australian in 2023. I would probably think about, I'm not going to get all Tim's books out. This is an empty notebook, so it's okay. I would think about science. Would be my number one thing if I talked about the earth. It would be about science. Okay, that's in my backpack. That was not in the backpack of the people who wrote the Bible. They had a very different backpack full of very different things when they used exactly the same words. We're saying exactly the same word, but our backpacks are full of very different things. And to not understand that is to impose my worldview onto the Bible rather than learning what the worldview of the Bible is and integrating that into my life. Does this make sense? This is really important when we read things like Genesis. The funny thing is, when you read, science versus, or creation versus science, this is some of the conflicts around these. That was not even a concept when the people wrote the Bible. They never intended it. Science was never in the backpack. It was not meant to be a science book. It was meant to be an origin book. The story of the human race. How did we get here? It's the questions that science can't answer. That's the writers of Genesis had a very different backpack to what we have today. So I'd encourage you to open up your eyes, open your heart to the story of the Bible and understanding the context that you're reading, not just imposing the context that we have today. This is very helpful when reading the Bible. Take a step back and say, what were the writers actually trying to say? People might say, do you literally believe the Bible? And I would say, yes, I literally believe the intent that the writers were trying to write. Not something else. I don't put my worldview on it and literally believe it. I literally believe what they were trying to say. Does this make sense? Do you understand the difference? I literally believe that they were trying to say something. And I literally believe that. Does this make sense? So let's have a look at Genesis chapter 1. And we're going to go through it little by little. And I just pray that today, that if you're a little confused in your life, that you would dig a little deeper and find yourself in this God story, because it's really powerful and it's going to give you great steadiness or strength into your life. Okay, it says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. If you haven't read the Bible, this is the first line. Here we go. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earths. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So it wasn't completely empty. There was something there. There was matter there already. And God said, let there be light. And there was light. God saw that the light was good, and he separated it, or he ordered it, is the word. He ordered it, the light from the darkness. He made categories. God called the light day, and he called the darkness night. And there was evening, and there was morning, and the first day. This is a little pattern of writing that we don't really have in English today, but it's a little bit like poetry, but a certain kind of poetry. It's not mythical or scientific. There's a whole range that's kind of our English categories. There's a whole range of categories of writing in the middle of that have been used in history that we don't really use today. Does this make sense? This would fit into one of those categories. It's concepts, and the main thing that you're going to see here is patterns. So every day it starts the same and it ends the same. It's like a poem that goes over and over. And the first point is that it's about God ordering things, not creating things out of nothing. It's about God taking what is chaotic and bringing it into order. This is the main point of Genesis chapter 1. Moving from chaos to order. And God's order is good. Or you could say no purpose, random, no purpose, to purpose and order and beautiful. This is the story of Genesis chapter 1. It's a good story. And we're going to get invited into this story pretty soon. Okay, but my first question is, why would God even create anything even to start with? Why does God create? Why does he even do that? Was God like empty inside and he just needed humans to fill his heart with happiness because he was feeling so lonely maybe? We don't believe in a God who's lonely. We believe in a Trinity God who is Father, Son, Holy Spirit, who had perfect relationship and perfect love in and of himself. This is the Trinity that we believe in. This is a very unique concept. You won't find a Trinity in any other thought process in the world. This is a uniquely Bible God story, is the Trinity. Perfect relationship he was already in. And out of that relationship flows his creativity, his order, and everything that we see. So God actually creates us, human beings, who actually have the ability to love him or not. This is God taking a huge risk with us. He's already fully loved. He's already got full purpose, everything. He's totally self-sufficient, and yet God creates us who have the ability to reject him. This is incredible. That's how much God loves us, is he takes a risk to be able to create us. And God calls it good. God calls all of his creation good thing. Or another word for that word good is functioning the way that it was designed to be. When God looks at you, good, functioning the way it was meant to be. When he looks at the stars and the light and the day and the night and the seed and harvest and weather, and all of these patterns that he's created, he says it's good and it's functioning the way it's meant to be. So day 1, day 2, and day 3 in Genesis chapter 1 are all about God bringing order to things that are full of chaos. That's what they're about. Day 4 to 6, day 4, 5, and 6 are about filling those things and making them functional and full of purpose. So on day 4, he creates the function of the light through the sun. He brings the birds and the animals reproduce of their own kind. And day 6 is the land, and God provides them, and humans then are invited into the story to bring, not only to be part of God's order, but to actually be a part of creating order in the world. This is our story. Genesis chapter 1, verse 26. Let's have a look at this. It says, "Then God said, 'Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish.'" This is our purpose. "Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky." I know there's some professional fishermen here. "Over the livestock and the wild animals and all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. And God blessed them, and he said, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and every living creature that moves on the ground." That word rule means to be a steward or to be a governor, to make sure it does good, to make sure that order is actually working. Not to destroy the world, but to actually to protect it and fill the earth with God's goodness. The first thing I see in this part of the story is that we are image bearers of God. He says, "I'm making people, but I'm making them in my image." Doesn't mean that you are God, okay? This is very important. You are not God, but you have the image of God in your life. This is why it's very important that the concept of a human life is very important to God. Not because of its function, but because of whose image is on it. This is why it's important. This is one of the key distinctions from the rest of the Near Eastern cultures that surrounded Israel, what would later become Israel, surrounded them. A very key difference was that all of their kings were considered to have the image of God, but people were considered to be subservient to serve the image of God. Whereas the Bible writers flip this on its head and says, every single person will have the image of God. This is a revolutionary thought that every person is equally valuable. This was the beginning of human rights, that every person is valuable, every person has the same value. It comes from here. This was a new thought. It wasn't normal, it was a new thought. Each person has a human right. this separating factor, we are not like the animals. This separating factor from us and the animals is really important to God too. And our culture is a little bit mixed up on this, right? We're all the same. We're all the same as the animals. We are not the same as the animals. We are stewards of the animals. We are created to bring God's order to the world. We have consciousness, awareness of God, and awareness of self. So this image bearer was given, this capacity was given despite morality, race, age, physical ability, stage of life, consciousness of life. We are all given the image of God on our lives. This is so important for us. We believe that. This is the Bible story. So the people of God are, you could say it this way, the family of God is the most value-giving to people, group of people in the whole world. We are the most diverse group of people in the whole world. This is the most diverse group of people that has ever happened in history is the family of God. We bring everybody in. God doesn't just create a few people and exclude the rest. He invites every single person in the world into his family. People can reject that, but God's invitation is wide open to the world today. And that is the good news, that he sees every person as valuable. The second thing I see is he creates order through opposite harmonies, things that are opposite, but they go together. Night and day, water and earth, birds and sea creatures, men and women. This is really important because it shows us the nature of God's creative ordering. It shows me this also, that you being different than me is part of the way that God expresses himself. Male and female, we're different. If you're married, you know this. We are different people. But part of that is a reflection of who God is. That in that difference, we see something of God that we would not see if we were all the same. This is part of who God wants the church to be. We are very different. And in our church here, we have so many different people, so many different backgrounds, so many different cultures. And I'm just so thrilled that we're here together, all under the one name, Jesus. This is the beautiful story of the gospel. Welcome, wherever you're from, welcome into the family of God. Your diversity actually shows something of who God is. He's so creative. He's so much bigger and more diverse than you would ever think. And then he says, take care of the earth. My daughter, she wants to be a vet, which is really cute. We'll see how she goes. But I tell her all the time, this is actually a wonderful thing. This is actually one of the first jobs that God ever gave to humanity. You're actually going right back to our very roots. Take care of the animals, take care of the earth. This is a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing that should not be looked down on. Adam, let me talk about Adam and Eve for a little bit. Adam, because some people get hung up on this, which there is no need to be hung up on it. Adam simply means human in Hebrew. That's what it means, human. Adam and Eve were probably not their names, by the way. This is a later telling of this story, okay? It wasn't written contemporary. It wasn't written at the same time these people were being born, okay? This was written later by a Hebrew writer about the origins of humanity. Does this make sense? So their names probably weren't Adam and Eve. Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Adam. It's a concept. Adam was human. This is the human origins. And Eve's name is life. We've got human and we've got life. This is the beginning of humanity. In fact, many times in Genesis, Adam is called the Adam or the human. 22 times he's called the human. So the concept that we're trying to get is that Adam represents more than just a person. He represents humanity. And we're going to see this in the Bible story as we go along, that later on, Jesus is actually called the perfect Adam. Because next week, we're going to talk about how Adam failed. and dragged us, all of humanity, into that. He's a representation of all of humanity. And then we get to Jesus, the new Adam, the perfect Adam, a representation of all of humanity in Christ. And he died for us, rose again, invites us into a brand new story. Okay, so this is our origins. There's going to be a bunch of resources on the website this week. If you want to nerd out on this stuff, you can. If you're not interested, that's fine. I'm not going to get into it today. But if you want to go into things like DNA and the origins of humanity, I'm going to have some resources on the website. You can jump into it. Very interesting. There's podcasts about it. Very interactive. Accessible. You don't have to be a scientist to jump into it, but if that's something that you're interested in, go ahead. But I think the point is we see ourselves in Adam and Eve. That's important, that we see ourselves in them, that they're not some just pre-human or apes that are there. We need to see ourselves in this origin story because they are the beginning of what is to come. Okay. Adam, the human, was formed out of the dust, and Eve out of his side. The dust is not, again, you'll notice that God doesn't create him out of nothing. He's not nothing and then created. There's dust, and then God forms the dust. This word form is very important in Genesis chapter 1. Forms or orders it into something which becomes the man. It's not about a scientific process. It's about our morality. And it's about who we are and who we will become. Meaning, you've heard this from ashes to ashes, dust to dust. That concept is the concept we're talking about right here. That Adam comes from the dust. That we come from the dust. That we have a finiteness about our lives. That's what it's saying. That we will not be forever. That there is a beginning and an end to this story. That God will redeem us, but there's a finiteness to who we are as human beings. You'll see this word forming is very important to the cultures that surrounded them in the Near East as well. In fact, in Egypt, there's many old stories about the gods forming the pharaohs on a wheel of clay. That the gods formed them. It very much fits into the culture that surrounded them, the idea of being formed by God. But we are not materially formed, but we are formed by significance, and we are image bearers. Okay? It's very important here to understand as well that we are formed physically. I think this is really important. That we are formed physically, not just spiritually. We are not just spiritual beings. That God has created our bodies, that our bodies are important to God. And I don't just mean eat healthy and go for a run. I mean the nature of having a body as a human being is important to God. That was God's choice in how he created us, and he did it on purpose. There's a reason. Everything that I am as a person resides in my body. I am not an out-of-body person. I am an in-body person. My body is important. To honor each other's bodies is important. It's very important. That's why we talk about in marriage that you give your body to your spouse. This is very important to God. That it's more than just trying to create moral standards. It's about the essence of who we are as people, as a human being. To give your body is a big thing to God. To respect someone's body is a big thing to God. That's why we see, when we're going to come soon, we're going to start seeing violence in the Bible, God against people's bodies. God hates the violence against people's bodies. He hates it. He's so angry about the violence against people's bodies. We are not violent people. Christians are not violent people. We love peace, and we are, in fact, so much of Jesus' message was anti-violence in a world that was incredibly violent, way more violent than our world. This is important. Your body is important to God. In the next story, we're going to see about how Adam and Eve reject this and they fall back into chaos. So it's the fall story is about the opposite of creation, which creation is about moving from chaos into order and beauty. And then the fall story is going to be about moving from beauty and order back to chaos. And we're going to continue down and down and down into chaos until we get to the flood, which is total chaos, back to the waters of where it came from in Genesis chapter 1. I know this talk might seem like a little bit like a university lecture, but I hope that you have time. I'm just trying to respect your ability to think, because we're smart people and we need to engage the Bible. And I hope this is encouraging to you. God fills Adam and Eve with his breath. This breath represents the life of God. You have breath. In fact, the word breath in Hebrew is the same word for spirit, and it's actually very similar to the same word used for God. And the concept was this: every time you breathe, you say the word God. You say God in Hebrew. It's just such a beautiful concept. You're saying God, 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 in and out God, in and out God, until the day that you stop breathing, and then you will meet God. It's this beautiful, holistic approach that we see in the Bible here. This is so brilliant. I hope that's inspiring to you to get more in the Bible. Here's the big part I wanted to get to today, because I want to talk a little bit about your purpose and my purpose for being a human. We are co-managers, rulers, regents, ambassadors for God on this earth. That's what you are. I hope that you don't feel insignificant today, because you represent God to the world, to this earth. And that is a big call. It doesn't just end with God making people. He gives them a job to rule over the animals for the flourishing of the world. This is not a liberal talking point about caring about the planet. This is the Bible story. This is the God story, that we are created to look after this world. Some people think, oh, well, I'm just going to fly away. This world doesn't matter. That's not the Bible story. The Bible story is, no, we were created to flourish this world. And at the end, we are not flying away to some other disembodied place. We're going to get to this at the very end of the story. God is going to renew the whole world, and us as part of that. So we are stewards, not owners, but we are stewards of the earth in the same way that God is. You could say we are, and we bring up, Jesus uses this concept later, but we will become the hands and feet of God on the earth. This is really important. So Jesus actually talks about this later when he says in Matthew chapter 28, verse 18, he says, go into the whole world. Exactly the same thing. Think back to Genesis 1. The same calling that God gives Adam and Eve, he gives to us today. It says, go into the whole earth and fill it with take what you've got here and fill the whole earth with it. And as you do that, the Spirit of God is with you. It's the same calling. It's not an old God and a new God. It's one story all the way through, the same story, that God continually calls us to the same mission, to fill the whole earth with his goodness. That's our call. Some of us are like, wow, that seems very big, and I'm just like trying to do my job. No. You see yourself differently than that. You are called by God to fill the earth with his goodness. Everywhere you go, every day, every breath, you're filling it with that. He says, I've been given authority. Jesus says this, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. And I'm sharing that authority with you. That is the same as what he said in Genesis. Genesis chapter 2, we're almost there, verse 15 to 23. The Lord took the man and he put him in the garden to work. Come on, man. Work is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. Contribution is a good thing. Take care of it. I just pressed a button and lost my spot. I'll be back 1 second. Okay, there we go. And God commanded the man, you are free to eat anything in the tree, from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the knowledge, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, meaning that you need to trust God for your life and not decide on your own terms what you think is good and evil. Does this make sense? This is the difference. This is what we do. We love to do what's right in our own eyes rather than what it's in God's eyes. And he says, no, eat from the tree of life, which is like a picture of God's goodness flowing into us when we allow God to take the lead, or the other tree, which is about you decide what's right. And we're going to see that they failed this test a little bit later. Verse 18, it says, and he saw that it was not good for men to be alone, which is totally true, because if you've been to a boy's house, it's a little wild. They need some help. Okay, I will make a suitable helper for him. Now the Lord had formed, again we said that word formed, out of the ground all the wild animals and the birds, and they brought him to the sky, and they brought him to the man so that he could name them. And wherever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So God invites Adam, human, into the experience of bringing order to the world. He actually brings the animals and he gets to name them. Naming was very important in their culture. Naming meant your place in the world. Much more than just giving you a name. Oh, that's Bob and that's Mary. No, it was like, no, your place is going to be this. Your place is going to be this. It was about bringing order to this beautiful new world. And God invites Adam into the ordering process, the creating, ordering process. It's pretty good. It's creative. If you're a creative person, this is good news. God invites you into creative order. See the two parts here? Creativity and order. They both work together. It's not chaos. It's creative order. So here's my conclusions from this story. Genesis chapter 1. A bit of an overview. This is not answering every question, I know. But it's a bit of an overview. Number 1, I've been created in love by a triune God in a perfect unity and self-sustaining love. That's the God who created me, who formed me. Not because he was lonely, but because he loves. His love must express itself. It's who he is. It's his nature. We are formed physically, not just spiritually, and this is important to God. My physical body is important to God. I have the image of God along with all humans, no matter their state. Therefore, I must love other people. It's not possible to say I love God and hate other people. That is an oxymoron. Okay? I have the image of God along with all other humans. Okay, purpose. I'm invited into governance of the whole world for its flourishing. Not to destroy it so that I can get rich, but for the world's flourishing, including the people around me. That's what we'll get to later with the church in the story. Christians are to fill the whole earth with his goodness, order, and creativity. And the creativity of God for its flourishing. Goodness, order, and creativity. This is what we have to give to the world. You are part of that story. I am part of that story. And today I want to invite you into God's story for the world. Not simply the culture or what we're learning on cable TV or social media. We have a much bigger story than that, and a beautiful story. It's a much longer story, and we are part of that history. I am not above that history. I am part of that history. And God is going to use us in a powerful way, I believe, in the years and the decades to come in his wonderful story. I'm going to pray. We're going to take questions up the back on that, and we're going to do some podcasts around Q&A about some of these stories. I've also got a bunch of resources available on our website /Find Yourself in the Story. There's a bunch of resources there, podcasts that go deeper into some of these concepts that I briefly mentioned about. If you want to go a little bit deeper, you can. The Bible Project is a fantastic visual concept of some of these things that we're talking about. You can jump on there and have a look. and we'll be answering questions. Pastor Shane Willard this Tuesday will be answering a bunch of these questions as well. We're going to talk a lot about narrative and literature styles in the Bible that help us understand the Bible where we wouldn't naturally. So I'm going to pray. Thank you, Jesus. God, we thank you for your story. And we are part of that. Every single person here, no matter how they feel today, whether they feel insignificant or disconnected, that they are in fact not. That they are loved and chosen by you to be image bearers of God. God, I pray you give them confidence to know that we've been chosen by you for a reason. We've been called for a purpose. And that purpose is the flourishing of the world in your story. So I pray, God, you'd give us courage to live our lives confidently, humbly, but confidently with you. And I pray for people here that are maybe struggling, that feel even disconnected from God today, that they would come back to that one who formed them in your image. God, they would come back to you today. Give them courage to open their heart to you. And I pray, God, that you would show them how much you love them. Do a great work in their lives today. And I pray as we go out of this place this week, that we would go and everything that we touch would become better, blessed, more creative, more ordered, more flourishing through the good news of Jesus. We love you, God, trusting in you.